Hi everyone, my name is Cameron. This is not your regular episode of Max's Mad Mythic Mercenaries. Instead, I'm here to talk about a campaign I recently finished with my friends and players of mine. We have Tanner and Osprey, and we are talking about Dungeons and Dragons Rime of the Frostmaiden. Tanner, Osprey, say hey.
Hello.
Hello.
So we had a campaign, a lot of players, we can talk about that in a little bit, but these two boys were with me. Osprey played Vire, who was here from the beginning, from the very first session. Tanner, you joined, but you were like part of the old guard now, basically.
I joined in media res, as they call it.
Yeah, you joined in the middle of chapter 3, and we played through 7. The book is 7 chapters long, so you were there for most of the campaign. There's things I want to talk about. I guess for context, we played through Rime of the Frostmaiden using the Adventurers League rules. We started the campaign at the beginning of 2021. It lasted almost exactly 2.5 years. I did count. And I believe it lasted 64 3 to 4 hour sessions about there. For me, it was a lot of fun to run. Using the Adventurers League rules is how we started. I would have moved away from it a little bit, but I believe it was all of our first opportunity doing Adventurers League stuff. You two had never done AL before, I think, right?
Nope,
Yeah.
that is correct.
And we had people specifically vote to stick with Adventures League rules.
Yes. But you two, all three of us have had D&D experience before. I guess, do we want to go around the table real quick and just talk about general D&D experience? Osprey, do you want to start? Or was this your first?
No, this was not my first. My first experience with D&D, like actually getting to play, I had seen my dad's 3.0 rule books when I was growing up, but I had never actually had the chance to play. I just kind of flipped through the books. When I was an adult, I got to play a little bit of 3.5, and that was chaotic.
As 3.5 wants to be.
Yeah, I got told, because my DM at the time literally had everything that had ever been published for 3.5.
And
that
that's
was
a lot of
official
stuff.
material.
It's a fucking material.
They took the first time player and went, "You can be anything." I was like, "All right, you're gonna have to help me narrow this down because this doesn't."
Yeah, that's decision paralysis.
This is too much.
Yeah, that'd be. Yeah.
I ended up playing a. I don't remember if she was a half elf or a full elf, but she was a bard druid multi-class. Played that for a while. Somebody else kind of wrecked the campaign. And then eventually got to do a little bit of 5th ed. It was supposed to be Adventures League, but they went, "Hey, we don't have a lot of room. This one guy's running, this one guy shows up and he'll just run games that aren't specifically AL. Just make your character and you can play with him if you want. You might prefer that since most of our group is going to be like kids."
Yeah.
So I played that for a little while. I played a Draconic Sorcerer for that one. And then I've attempted to run D&D games like 3 or 4 times now. Either something happens or I just get completely overwhelmed and burned out trying to run it. And then, yeah, for D&D it was mostly that, and then Rime of the Frostmaiden.
So this is the first campaign you've actually finished.
Yes, this is the first time I've actually seen a campaign from beginning to end.
Which for context, it does make me really, really sad because Osprey was so close to finishing our Domains of Dread campaign. And I think it was like, the finale was an epic, so I had to schedule around like, I think 15 people, and I forget what, you had maybe work came up or something. I was like, oh, he's gonna miss this one. I'm glad we got to do a proper. It's one of the reasons I delayed the finale of this was because I was like, no, fuck it. Like Vire's been here from the beginning. He and Abrielle at minimum need to be here at the end. So yeah, I'm glad you're able to join us for that one. And for context, Tanner and Osprey can't see this, but in the video, Osprey's character, which we'll talk about everyone's characters, but Osprey's character is Vyre, who's in the middle of this this group shot. Tanner, what about you? Your history with D&D?
I am much newer to D&D as a player, certainly, so I only really started playing when 5th edition came out, and I think there's a bunch of us, there's a good bit of the community that I feel like, because 4th edition was kind of a letdown for a lot of people, but 5th edition was a rejuvenation of it, who finally came into the fold after growing up as a kid, really loving high fantasy and RPGs, mostly through video games and, board games, but, it was still really uncool to do D&D, even though we saw the books as kids and were like, man, those look really cool, but I don't want to be the nerd that does it. Which, looking back on, we should have. Cameron, you and I have known each other for a long time. We
could have spent
D&D.
all that time playing D&D.
Exactly, and we would have enjoyed it, and it would have been perfectly fine, because, we thought we were cool, but we were not, and we still aren't, and,
yeah.
we should have doubled down on it back then.
Yeah.
So I'm relatively new to 5th edition, or to D&D in general, like I said, starting with 5th edition. This is the first campaign, that I also have seen to a finale, and as you noted, I was not at the beginning either, so I don't know if I
thought this was your second. I thought you finished a campaign, and that's when you got free to join this one. No, that wasn't a proper ending?
No, I mean, I don't actually know how many people see a true resolution to a D&D campaign, right? I actually think that's kind of the cool thing about D&D, is that it's this open world, and like real life, there's not always, the final act to your story. Sometimes it's just the world goes on and your characters kind of ride off into the sunset and do other stuff.
Everyone gets a final act to their story, Tanner.
I guess so. And actually, in the campaign that I played previously, my character did finally get to his level 20 one-shot adventure that I brought him into. So yeah, that is true.
Oh no, I was talking about in real life. We all die someday.
Also that, yes.
But I didn't realize. Yeah, this was your first time finishing one. Also, that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think that's actually that uncommon. I feel like you said, how long did it take to finish this one? 2.5 years?
2.5 years, yes. And this was not level 1 to 20 campaign. This was specifically level 1 to 12.
Yeah,
per
I actually
Adventures
don't think
League
it's
rules.
that uncommon for people to not finish campaigns. I feel like if you're on the Discords and the Reddits of the world, it feels like there's all these people that are constantly have all this experience. But I imagine if you had the pie chart of D&D players, a vast majority of people would not commit to say they have actually played through the lion's share and adventure to the end.
Agreed. And I think that's one of the things that I one of the reasons I bounced off D&D early on was I played it in 3.5 with our friend Max and Nate and them, and we started a campaign and we didn't finish it, and I think so emotionally unsatisfied that we didn't get to finish the story. I was like, fuck this. If I'm going to be playing games with these losers and they can't commit to a schedule, I am not doing this shit again. I tried it again. They convinced me to play again in 4th edition, and the same thing happens. And I loved 4th edition. But I just stopped playing because I was like, I need to commit to finishing a campaign. And then they tricked me into doing it one more time in 5th edition. And that was the first time I really got into DMing. Was Max had to leave the Waterdeep Dragon Heist campaign, and he's the DM, and I white knuckled, I refuse to aim to do another campaign and not complete it. So I became the dungeon master. Still haven't finished that one, although it's ongoing. But in that time, I got to do Domains of Dread. We played that. I think it was 24 sessions of a campaign, so a shorter one. But that one's done. And now Rime of the Frostmaiden is officially my second campaign finish. I've done one-shots and stuff since then. But yeah, for me, and from the playing that I've done and the running games that I've run, I really, really like the format of the book. I have bounced off of the Adventurers League format. I think there are some great things about it that I want to talk about later, but for the things that I value in D&D, it's not really giving me much. What was your experiences with both? Like, how did you feel about the campaign as an adventure and a story, and then how did you feel about the Adventurers League format and stuff?
So part of why I got started with this to begin with is I hadn't ever actually experienced a pre-written adventure in D&D that I had really known what was going on. So I had actually made a post on Reddit going, hey, is there a way to just, like, solo this? Because I don't know enough people who play. And that's when Cameron literally sent me a message going, hey, if you want, we can try to set up a group and do this.
True soloing. Let's set up a group.
Well, I think...
Because when you think solo, that's the first thing I think of is let's get a group together.
I think the question was worded in a way... I think you were asking about Adventurers League, right? Like, can you do Adventurers League stuff by yourself or something?
So I thought that Adventurers League was another way to refer to the modules.
So the reason we're playing Adventurers League is because I misunderstood what the question you were asking, and that put us
really the true way to get into Adventurers League, apparently.
Yeah.
It was a misunderstanding of what I was getting at.
Yeah. I guess in retrospect, a very fortunate misunderstanding.
Yeah, like, so I was like, I mainly just wanted to go through a pre-written module.
Yeah.
Like, that was the base idea. That's why I was hoping, maybe I could solo it, because I didn't know enough people who played.
Yeah.
And I wasn't in a position to get out much at the time. So, because I think this was...
this was in the 2021, beginning of 2021 was still like the middle of the pandemic, right? Or beginning of the pandemic? Middle? Yeah.
Kind of middle-ish, I think.
Yeah, if we were getting out, it was
December...
very much like small excursions, right?
Yeah. But so yeah, and I think so. The campaign itself was fun. There were some interesting things. I feel like Arbitrary being able to randomly show up twice on random encounter tables is a bit much. Which we are so lucky we survived that. So we are so lucky.
Yeah, for context, Arbitrary is a not a great worm, an ancient white dragon, a level like 20, maybe 24 challenge rating monster. The party met her twice. The first time was in a random encounter. It's basically in chapter 2, they have all these random encounters, and I think if you roll like a 10 or something, she shows up. And that happened. And the second time was right after you visited the that was actually not a random encounter. You visited this ship that was frozen in the ice to get the Professor Scant from it. What you all didn't know is she has layers all throughout Icewind Dale, and that was one of her layers. That's why the treasure was all frozen solid, because she built a treasure.
That was the place for no cover whatsoever, or any place to hide from said ancient white dragon.
Real quick before we get into the story of how we dodged that bullet. Yeah. I got that it was her lair. I thought whether or not she showed up was a random...
Oh, yes, that's true. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, you did get unlucky twice. Yeah. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. We escaped because resistance to cold and polymorphing, our wizard polymorphed into a whale, and we all hid in the mouth of the whale.
Yeah. Some clever wizard shenanigans.
Geppetto that shit if we can.
Yeah.
Or Monstro, what was the name of that whale? Monstro? I think that's right.
Technically, I learned this recently. Monstro's not supposed to be a whale. He's a
leviathan of some kind.
He's the what do they call them? The dreadful dogfish or something. Yeah. But so Tanner, what about you? What did you think about or I guess Osprey didn't finish the second part, the adventure and then Adventurers League rules.
Yeah. The adventure was great. The Adventure League rules I felt kind of hindered kind of long-term RP. Like, it's great for pop in, have like quick encounters with people, but I think for like a long running campaign, I feel like it got in the way because there were multiple times where it's like, oh hey, this character pops in, but they supposedly have done the same things as you, but they weren't there and the outcomes could be different. And when you don't have a consistent group, it's harder to do that long-running interpersonal role play.
Yes, absolutely. So I guess I missed a bit of context. For those that don't know, Adventures League is a specific way to play Dungeons and Dragons, which is designed around everyone follows the same rule set. You can play any of the hardcovers. They come out with a series. They probably have hundreds of individual, like 2 to 4 hour adventures, and it's mostly designed around if you show up to a store that runs Adventures League, you are relatively confident in the consistency of the experience because of the rule set. But like Osprey said, those rules, to create that consistency, they limit the what I'd call like the game master fiat, like our ability to change whatever we want, which is, I think, a big traditional part of TTRPGs. They limit that in order to create the consistency, but for these longer adventures, like Osprey is saying, that limitation kind of builds up over time, where it's like the characters are really interested in this stuff, but because it's not in the book and we're playing Adventures League, like I can't just like make it up. Although I did cheat here and there, and I'll talk about that.
And there's still that certain amount of one player or one character experienced this very differently.
Yes.
Because they went through it with a different group.
Yeah.
But supposedly you went through the same thing, and then I remember lots of frustrations with us trying to figure out what is the Adventures League rule for X, Y, or Z, because it was sometimes it came across as inconsistent. You had to hunt through a bunch of random documents to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like,
they post in like a Facebook group. Like, yeah.
Yeah, like it felt like it got in the way more than it helped our particular situation. Like cons, it's great. Like if you're doing like a pickup session or two here and there, cool. It does that really well.
Or if
That's
you like
great.
the epics.
What?
Or if you like the epics, where it's like, oh, we're gonna get 40 people together, and all the dungeon masters need to be on the same page really quickly. It's awesome for that. But yeah, like you said,
long-term campaigns, I would not use it for again whatsoever.
Yeah, that's why. So before we started recording, I asked Cameron, like, when did Adventures League really come out, and was it before or after the pandemic? And I think that makes a difference because I can totally see this structure working for a game store that is like every Friday night we hold a like D&D thing, and it's a drop in, drop out, like, and sometimes we have just random like DMs show up who might not be the same person. So then if you're doing that, like, I completely agree with you, Osprey, like continuity becomes tough, right? Because it's like this random person shows up with the same, who supposedly has the same background as me, but like every campaign is a little bit different, so you're kind of like retrofitting them in of like, why the hell are they here, right? Like, okay, it took our group, you know, months and months and months of effort to get to the secret city, and then random person shows up on like here. Like, it's very strange to like build in, and everyone does their best, right?
Yeah.
But I can totally see that working in a this is a random game store, local game shop. It's their Friday night D&D thing, and nobody's really like clued in on continuity, but we want some kind of rule set that like people can come in every Friday and feel like they've made progress and feel like they're getting a character that has a rich backstory, where they're getting
the
some
same
consistency
treatment between tables, I think, is the big thing. That
exactly.
You don't have
like,
to worry about, oh, this DM ruled this one way and this DM ruled this the other way.
Yeah, I can see it totally working in that kind of context. And then the rule set says like, oh, and you can use this for bigger ongoing campaigns, and maybe you can, but it really isn't built for that, right? Like,
it felt like a stretch, kind of a square peg round hole situation. So I did look it up. Adventurers League started in 2014, but it's actually just a rebranding. What it was originally called was the Role Playing Game Association Network.
Gotcha.
That was founded in 1980.
Not nearly as catchy.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's
That's
been
a
around for
good
43
rebranding.
years. Yeah. Yeah, it was I again had a lot of fun running the adventure. I liked the setting and everything so much that I'm planning on doing a sequel, but I am not gonna run it with Adventures League rules. I think the reason, like Osprey said earlier, we had votes, I think, on 2 separate occasions on if we were gonna stop using Adventures League rules. And my rule as the GM was I said that it has to be unanimous, because the people that signed up at the beginning signed up under the impression that it was going to be Adventures League, and I didn't want to take that. I didn't want to just be like, oh, you've been playing for 9 months and now screw you, I'm going to change it. So there was specifically one player, we're not going to name names, great person, a lot of fun to play with, but one player that really wanted the Adventures League rules. So we did finish out the campaign with it, but the sequel will not be beholden to that. I do want to talk about the party real quick. Because it was Adventures League, we did have a lot of churn. I checked. I have 35 currently registered players in the Roll20 lobby.
No.
Yes.
Really? 35?
Yeah.
It added up fast.
But
I don't know if that's the churn's the word you're looking for. That's freaking hurricane, frothing sea.
So it comes from multiple things. It's not just this campaign. It's
okay. It's the one shots you did too.
Yes. So I ran.
Okay.
I want to be clear about what I ran. I ran Rime of the Frostmaiden, the entire hardcover. All the content that the players went after. There's one really good thing about the hardcover is there is a lot more content than you would reasonably do in one adventure. Like, people talk about replayability of campaigns. The party could potentially, the ending is kind of the same thing, but the party could potentially do this again, and instead of going east at Bryn Shander, you go west, and like all of Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 would be totally different, which is really neat. I ran all of the hardcover. I ran all of the Season 10 adventurers. That includes let me make sure I've got it right. The preview adventure was called Ice Road Trackers, where they meet a bunch of talking animals, which was very fun and cute. There's a series of 10 adventures called Plague of Ancients, where you're helping out Goliath tribes, and then you eventually find this second long-forgotten city under the ice called Zorventroth.
There's just a bunch of them in Icewind Dale, you know.
Yeah.
That's the place for
it's the
lost cities. To just end up.
Ancient wizard city graveyard. When a wizard city knows that it's time to die, it leaves
that's
the
where it
herd
goes.
and it travels to Icewind Dale. And then there was so there's that whole adventure, and then there are 2 epics involved in those adventures. 1 or 3. 1 at the beginning, 1 at the culmination of the halfway point, and 1 at the end. So I ran 14 in additional adventures inside that. 1 of them being, or 2 of them being epics. So that's where the additional player size comes in. But yeah, the party makeup has changed. I genuinely I'd have to dig through my notes to remember the exact makeup of the original party. I remember it was a bunch of holy rollers. It was like 2 paladins, a cleric, a sorcerer, or maybe 2 paladins, 2 clerics, and a sorcerer.
So 3 of us were Azamar.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Very celestial.
I was a Divine Soul Sorcerer specifically. There were, I think, 2 paladins, and then one of the other Azamar was a ranger, I want to say. So, but like all of the characters had some divine,
Yes.
context.
Yep. The like over the course, 2.5 years, like we were saying, is a hard time to keep one group together. And I was very dedicated to, I'm not going to put this on hiatus. We're going to get through the campaign. So our final party makeup, Osprey, do you want to introduce your character, then Tanner, then I'll go through the other 3.
Okay, so Fire, who started off as just this Divine Soul Sorcerer who didn't know he was an Azamar.
Yes.
He just straight up did not know. He blamed all of the weird holy stuff going on him being a Divine Soul Sorcerer. It wasn't until partway through the campaign that he found out he was an Azamar, and I don't think he still fully understands the ramifications of that on a personal level. Because he hasn't had time to do a lot of introspection.
Yeah, I guess a lot of that's probably going to happen during our, 5-year break.
Yeah, he needs to meet other Azamar to kind of, and, actually get to talk to them to have a sense of what does that actually mean beyond, hey, I'm a Divine Soul Sorcerer anyways. And then he also ended up taking a couple levels of Twilight Cleric, which actually synergized really well. I was kind of surprised at how well it worked. It allowed me to wear Mithril Chain, which helped me so much. Oh my gosh, getting that AC up to 19 saved my bacon.
Yeah.
And the night vision that comes from Twilight Cleric is just... And it made sense thematically. He was starting to do more of the more formal religious side of things. And I had a whole backstory written up for him with, NPCs and whatnot that... Because of how Adventures League goes, we didn't really have a way to incorporate any of that backstory. But, so yeah, by the time he was done, he had Chardalyn poisoning, corrupted Chardalyn poisoning, and he had recovered that, so now he was also getting, a cold boost to his damage. He was a Divine Soul Sorcerer, Twilight Cleric multiclass, and just really starting to come into his own as an Azamar. And yeah, that was Vire.
Yeah, and Vire
for those that don't know, Chardalyn being a magic gem, right, that when corrupted...
It's like a naturally occurring magical capacitor. And the first adventure that ever happened in Icewind Dale was a book called the Crystal Shard. And that is the story of how the Chardalyn gets corrupted. It gets corrupted with demonic energies, and it's a phenomenon local to Icewind Dale. You can find Chardalyn elsewhere that's purified and uncorrupted, and it basically works like you cast a spell into it, and then you can chuck it like a grenade, and it casts the spell. But the Chardalyn in Icewind Dale specifically is different. And that's Vire is in the center of our little team photo. He's got the crystals embedded into his skin and growing out of his hair and stuff. But like Osprey said, he I want to, because this was a particularly frustrating point. Halfway through the Adventurers League Season 10 adventures, you fight this druid who has a Chardalyn staff, and when you defeat them, it explodes, and that's what corrupted Vire.
No. What happened was we were hunting down Frostclaw. We defeated Frostclaw, but some of the Chardalyn in the cave, when we defeated Frostclaw, exploded, and Vire didn't make the reflex save.
Yeah. I think it was you defeated Frostclaw, and then the druid that awakened Frostclaw was Feral Tongue. But yes.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so out of the entire party, Vire's the only one that doesn't make his save. And in Adventures League, they give you story awards, which are theoretically, and I think this happened a lot more in earlier Adventures League, you get this little tag on your character, and it's supposed to matter later on. This one never came up again. And I specifically went digging around, Vire has Chardalyn poisoning. What does that mean, fellow DMs? And everyone's like, they never use it again. I'm like, that's unsatisfying. I hope I was able to turn it into something satisfying at the end, but that was 1,000% me being at the end of adventure and being like, fuck it, we both know Vire's never playing Adventures League again, I'm just gonna cheat and make shit up.
I don't know, I think it was you and Osprey realizing, I don't know, so coming in the middle of it, right, it almost seemed like it added some extra baggage to Vire as a character. Not only is he struggling with this just finding out his true heritage, right? But on top of that, he almost is something that almost seemed to me, and the way you both played it, it reminded me of almost like a alcoholism or addiction, or someone who is when they're around it, they get this tingling feeling, right? And it is I don't know. I think it added some extra layer to the character.
It did. One of the things, if we were running this not Adventures League, one thing that could have been interesting is have a little bit of a side arc going on within the larger arc that's about finding a cure for this Chardalyn poison.
Yes. Yeah.
Because he essentially got a disease, and then the book doesn't give you a way to cure it. None of the cure disease stuff works. There's nothing that, like, you can't just, like, surgically remove.
No.
So, like,
you guys both did a really
character-
good job of, like, doubling down and, like, maybe had this unspoken rule of what was happening to Vire, because in situations where you could have metagamed your way out of it and just ignored it, it was like, no, Vire wouldn't do this because he feels like he like physically and emotionally has this reaction to it, right? It like it gives him this this paralysis, you know. Like I feel like you guys did a good
Osprey's
job
role
of
playing a lot.
digging into that.
But it definitely, I remember we had to have an out of character conversation where I had to be like, I know you're trying to cure yourself. I'm sorry. There's nothing.
I got nothing.
Yeah, and so, like, Vire kept trying to find answers, and, like, one of the things on the sheet that I wasn't, like, so one of the story rewards, specific, story notes for the Charlatan poisoning specifically mentions that it makes your character irrational and more irritable. So, like, Vire was one of those, like, outside of the Charlatan poisoning, he was very much I try to be kind of chill and patient and thoughtful. After the Charlatan poisoning, he's like, nope, I'm just running into danger, we're gonna fight stuff, like... And that's one of the things I like about role-playing, is when I get the chance to actually, like, I feel a little more confident about my skills when I can, like, be like, no, that would be meta, this is how my character would be. And, like, I want to engage with more campaigns where I can have a group where all of us, like, seriously care about RP, and we're working with a rule set that allows for that longer term, more in-depth, more flexible work with the roleplay.
Yeah. I really enjoyed watching you roleplay. It was a one of the big delights of the campaign. Tanner, Fabian. So if we're looking at the pictures, Fabian is the guy on the right who looks just like Link from The Legend of Zelda. He is a gnome, and right now it's all profile shots. But if we were doing the heights, you'd just see the top of his
shorter.
head.
Yeah, that's right.
He was a lot of fun to observe also because you made a character that was tied in closely with the, like, politics and surroundings of Icewind Dale. It would have, like, I wish we had you from the beginning, because by the time you joined, we had finished up most of the travel around 10 Towns. Yep. But the stuff that we did get to do in 10 Towns that Fabian was present for was a lot of fun. Tell us a little bit about Fabian and who he was.
Yeah, I really enjoyed playing Fabian Everpine, my forest gnome rogue who kind of had the aesthetic and more of the stylings of a ranger, but rogue by class. And yeah, green tunic and bright blonde hair and, you know, pointed ears. Very much a short, stout Link. But yeah, I crafted him as a Icewind Dale native, and I didn't really realize that the rest of the party was either travelers or people that are not really local to Icewind Dale, or if they are, were not really natives of the land.
I specifically requested you to be someone local, so I didn't have to, like, come up with a reason for you to be an Icewind Dale.
Why he's randomly there?
I was tired of all the because of the campaign turn. I was tired of, like, everyone, like, being like, okay, so why am I here again? I was like, I don't fucking know. Okay, from now on, anyone who creates a character is from here.
Yeah, you're just like, you don't randomly show up. You have to be from here. Yeah. And I really liked that because it gave him some, you know, and slowly over the course of the campaign, as he realized the peril that Icewind Dale is in, and he's had like a decently tough life being a gnome, and they're around Icewind Dale, but they're not really, you know, a common race necessarily. So I kind of imagined him as being some of the person who's seen as a second-class citizen. And he's had a rough upbringing where he would make ends meet by stealing from folks, right? Luring fishermen out to, like, oh, there's a great spot out here, I can, like, bring you to it, and then, you know, stealing from them. And he had no problem with that as long as they were human, because he saw them as being, you know, people that would look down upon his race. And he was, from a young age, kind of blessed by Arl, who ends up being a very important figure. In fact, arguably the most important figure of Icewind Dale, right? She's behind the Rime. And Fabian always struggled with that because he was not a devout person necessarily, but he always knew, and Arl knew, that he was kind of one of her chosen people, maybe not necessarily supposed to be the Moses of her people, but at the end of the day, she expected him to be kind of a scion of her message. And Fabian always denied that growing up. So it was kind of fun to play him as a local where his motivations early on in the campaign were just, oh god, don't die, I'm on the run for my life. He ended up in prison by the Dwerger, which is where he met the rest of the party, right, in a cell next to Valin. And then, for most of his motivation early on was just, I'm going to hang out with you guys because I have less likelihood of being caught and dying, to, no, we do need to solve this Rime thing that's going on because it does impact my homeland, and whether I want to admit it or not, I truly am a messenger of Arl, and I do love this land, and I want to see it, prosper, and she's acting irrationally, and I want to be a part of the solution.
Yeah, out of the whole party, your two characters had the closest tie-ins with Arl, which was a lot of fun. For Vire, it was, I think, something I kind of came up with to have, because Vire, he specifically is a follower of Saloon, right?
Yes.
But because you didn't know your ASMR heritage, I was like, we can have fun mechanically with the role-playing of the ASMR, spirit guide. And then for Fabian, it was actually, part of the structure of the adventure is at the beginning when you create a character, you get a secret. And you can either create your own secret, like Vire, I think you chose for his secret to be something about his family, which never really came into the game.
So actually how it was is you either don't get a secret or you roll on the table. I didn't want to roll on the table because I wanted to keep
you chose no secret.
I wanted to keep my character kind of consistent, and some of the secrets were, in my opinion, this is going to sound kind of rude, but some of them were kind of stupid. I have a piece of Dritz.
Oh yeah, you're a Dritz
fanboy. I really admire.
Yeah.
And that happened to one of the other characters, and I was just looking at that going, no, because I don't want one that won't make sense for my character.
Mm-hmm. So,
what you did partway through was, you basically, because Fire kept being like, I know there's, some sort of guardian that's been kind of keeping an eye out on me. This is why I'm going to Icewind Dale in the first place, is I was told to head this direction by this guardian. And got told, oh, hey, save Arl. My guardian literally went, you need to save her.
Yeah.
So Fire's like, oh, shit. And, one secret you came up with, well, not really secret of Fire's, but one thing you came up with is the person that attacked Fire when he discovered, and he discovered his powers as a result back in his backstory. You said was tied to the Red Wizards, I think.
Yes, yeah, so you had a reason to because there are Red Wizards in this campaign, a little bit, but then they're going to feature very heavily in the sequel campaign. Yeah, I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
And then Fabian's, it was probably the best secret you could roll on that table was, okay, now you've got cold resistance, and you've got instant ties to the big bad of the campaign, which, okay, time to reveal my big secret. The campaign is supposed to end after you beat Arl. The thing in the ice is actually nothing. It is not, there's no stat block in the book for it. It is an encounter you have in the book that is supposed to be creepy, but it doesn't lead anywhere. And I saw that in the book, and I was like, that is dumb as hell.
Yeah.
Is it literally just the I guess, spoilers for people watching this who haven't played Rime?
Yeah, spoilers for Chapter 7. Or Chapter 6, because it was in the caves.
Is it just like a tentacle creature locked in the ice that you see that's mysterious and then goes away?
It's literally just like a trap. Like, you remember when it like pulled in someone and like controlled them? It's just supposed to mind control you, make you stay there for an hour, and then deal you like 90 damage, and then that's it. It actually doesn't go away. So when the map changed, when I did that map change, I had to Photoshop that to make it happen. Because okay, go ahead.
Like, absolute props to you. I had no idea. I didn't, like, especially since that map for the final battle had that 3 different parts with, like, that map looked like it belonged in Rime of the Frostmaiden fighting this monster at the end. Which I do say it was a bit of poetic symmetry that Fire got to get the last hit. Like,
yeah, I basically, I gave it a stat block. So what I used was the, what's it called? The Far Realm Emissary as the stat block. It is a fucking hard fight, but you did pretty well with Arl's, like, trials and stuff. It felt really cool that Vire got that last blow, especially with him kind of coming to terms with his relationship with Arl, and then also the thing that I am really proud of is the idea of being able to influence her tenets. Like that whole cool thing I liked a lot. So that was the party. It was essentially the fight could have been very, very hard, but you all did well enough to get Arl on your side that it instead, I was fine either way. I was fine with it being a really fucking hard fight at the end, and I was fine with it, okay, Arl's the hard fight, and now that you've taken care of her and talked with her, now it's like the last scene of an anime where, like, the intro music is just playing again, and you're all just, like, beating the shit out of the bad guy while the credits roll kind of thing. That's what it felt like emotionally to me. And I was, like, so fine with that. It was a ton of fun.
Let me ask you this then, Cameron. Yeah. And again, I guess this is going to be spoilers for Rime and how it's supposed to be run. This whole thing probably is. But what is... So you did this great job of giving Arl a motivation for the Rime.
She doesn't have one in the book.
No.
She's just evil. She's just evil.
I don't believe you. No.
She wants to freeze Icewind Dale because she thinks it would be really cool if Icewind Dale was frozen.
I don't believe you. That's bullshit.
You did a really good job of seeding that. Like, there were tons of things leading up to it.
It's one of the first things that I realized about the book. I was like, so talking about the book, my review of the book, I give it 9 out of 10. I really, really liked almost everything in it. The structure is the strongest out of any of the official D&D books. The thematics are really good. The atmosphere, everything like that. The issue being that they don't give... she's an evil goddess, and therefore she's an evil goddess is the motivation.
I don't like it. Yeah,
it's not satisfying.
Give her a reason, because even if you're an evil goddess, right? Let's say you're just flat out evil.
People
you still
want
have
things.
A motivation to do something, right? Like, okay, maybe she's evil, but maybe she's freezing her own land and her own like people that would worship her for some reason, something. I don't know.
So Adventures League has some vague wording about adding encounters and things in Adventures. They say you can add encounters if they are appropriate and fit the thing, but they discourage GMs from doing it. But I 100% was like, no, fuck it. Like, I read it, I saw the thing in the ice, I was like, that's really cool. It doesn't go anywhere, and Arl needs motivation. I felt like I could link those things together.
Yeah.
I think I pulled it off pretty well.
Oh, yeah. You 100... We had no clue that you were just making that part up.
Yeah.
We thought that was just part of the module.
And I think one of the reasons why is because I did see that very early on. When I realized it, I forget when I realized it, sometime in, like, Chapter 2, I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to change. And I started foreshadowing as much as I could to tie things up a little better. Go ahead.
I also think, I don't know, like, D&D does this on occasion where it gives you a thread of something that doesn't have a backstory, where it's trying to let GMs know, like, hey, you could build off this if you want.
Yes.
And maybe the Thing in the Ice was something like that, because
100%.
again, for people who haven't played, it's like this like Lovecraftian eldritch horror, right? That is like buried in an ice cap, very much like at the Mountains of Madness, right?
Yeah.
Like creature that is like from another world, and they hint at it and then never do anything with it. I feel like D&D does that on purpose to give you, like, hey, here's the thing, DM, like, you know, a motivated DM like yourself, Cameron, you could run with this if you want.
Yeah, like, if you wanted to make this a level 1 to 20 campaign, like, you defeat Arl at level 12, and then you have the Thing in the Ice to deal with later on, or something like that. I think that was intentional. It doesn't work well with Adventures League rules, because Adventures League rules is saying you can't do things like that to keep the consistency, but that's why I don't really knock the book for that. I knock the book for not giving Arl a good motivation, but there are seeds like that. I guess talking through things that I didn't change much at the beginning of the campaign. The start of the campaign, Osprey, when you are traveling around 10 towns, the only thing I changed was, if you remember, there was a quest to meet some Chwingas, and there was a serial murderer quest that you were following. You're supposed to, at the beginning of the book, you're supposed to pick one of those and run it, but I felt like there's the chance that you like do that quest and then you're in the next town and you're just kind of done. I gave the group both of those quests to give you reasons to like keep exploring. Other than that, I ran almost all of 10 towns exactly as written. Most of chapter 2 with the wilderness exploration, things like the Lost... Were you there, Tanner, for the Lost Spire of Netheril, where they meet Dazan, the wizard, homunculus, and that sort of stuff?
I don't think so.
But that, the Wormdoom Crag and Sky Tower Shelter, I ran those almost exactly like they're written. Oh, go ahead.
I think that you mentioned something about tweaking some stuff with the Chardalyn Dragon, because I remember there was some slight frustration with the timing of that thematically. Some of it just came across as really unfair to the players.
Yes, as written. So when you get to chapter 3 is invading the Duergar fortress of Sunblight. You're supposed to get to the fortress, climb the mountain, get to the front door, and you see the Chardalyn Dragon leave. And then you have to either choose to go into the fortress, which why wouldn't you, or go follow the dragon. And if you follow the dragon, the way the travel times and distances work out is you can chase it and you'll catch up to it sometime in Bryn Shander. By that time, the dragon will have guaranteed to have destroyed Dugan's Hole, Goodmead, East Haven, Caer Dineval, Caer Koenig. Like, it's physically impossible for the party to catch up.
10 towns is what you just described.
Yeah, it's impossible for the party to catch up to the dragon unless they plan on cutting it off at Bryn Shander. If it's like at full health and everything. The other choice the party could make is they decide, we're going to explore this fortress first, and then we'll go deal with the dragon, in which case all of 10 towns is just destroyed. So what I wanted to do was, I was like, it makes more sense for the party to have as a DM, I want players to be able to influence things. And I 1000% need to give credit to the Alexandrian. The Alexandrian remix is where I got this idea and this modification, where the king of the Duergar doesn't release the dragon until it looks like he's ready to lose. And you, as players, got opportunity to sabotage the dragon, sabotage the launch, do things which allowed you to catch up to it. So you were able to do enough sabotage that you caught up to it at Goodmead. There was the potential for you to catch up to it before it even gets to Dugan's Hole. We didn't get all that stuff done, but you got enough there that you caught up to it in Goodmead, and you're able to destroy it before it, laid waste to everything. Yeah, that was important to me, to give you the opportunity to do that.
And that led to some interesting character moments, too, because Vyre had already fallen for the soon-to-be new... soon-to-be speaker of Goodmead. He had already fallen super hard, so when he realized that the dragon was going to go around destroying 10 towns, he went into Radiant Soul form, so he sprouts wings, glowing wings, flies up, tries to chase the thing via air, and then realizes he can't, and he is just panicking inside, because he's just like, the person I care about is in a whole lot of danger. We gotta figure something out. And he like frantically urges the party just get there as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Dugan's gold dies and fuck him.
Yeah, no one cares.
Shithole.
I am very much looking forward to when we do, because so we plan on at some point we're gonna do like here's 5 years of downtime, and I think right now I have you two and John, the player for Calamar, on board. And if we're looking at the pictures, the dark elf on the left, of like doing downtime stuff and coming back for the sequel campaign. And so I'm very much like, you have a lot of currency in 10 towns now, not just the gold you've gotten, but your reputations. You could have a lot of influence over how Dugan's Hole is like rebuilt, which I think would be a lot of fun.
But let me
yeah.
ask you this, Cameron.
Yes.
Like, so I really liked that Rime you described as this, and I think it's really accurate, is very sandboxy, right? And I think part of it is the geography of the place, where they say there are these 10 towns, and because they're all kind of closely linked, you can travel throughout them wherever, and each one has its own little side adventures. Do you think that Rime and other Icewind Dale adventures kind of suffer from the fact that geography-wise, like, obviously it's very cold and, you know, Nordic in its fashion, like, do you think that it suffers the fact that it doesn't have a ton of variety then? Because a lot of the 10 towns, I think they try to do their best, but it's just kind of tough because they've really, though the whole geography is just always cold, and if it's not ice fields, it is a alpine area that is also cold, that you don't get a lot of variety in geography.
It's not something, I guess, because I've played multiple other adventures, I feel like I get the variety from the collection that I've played. I think as I've played more and more, I realized I like the idea of smaller, more condensed settings. So I liked that, like, you're coming to Icewind Dale and you kind of know what it's going to be like. There are definitely, like, there's another campaign called Storm King's Thunder, which
Right.
takes place, like, across all of the Sword Coast and that area. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I was just reacting to the scope.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
But what I think Icewind Dale is that sandbox where Chapter 1 is like, you have 10 towns to choose from. Anywhere you go is going to have an adventure, and you're going to figure it out, and you're going to learn more as you go. And then it expands out to all of Icewind Dale in Chapter 2, where it's like, okay, now you're going to leave 10 towns, and you're going to explore the wilderness and find stuff. Whereas the Storm King's Thunder, the scope is bigger, but because the structure is not as strong, it's a much more linear. It's the problem with a lot of 5th edition D&D campaigns, I feel like, is the adventures break down to go to place, talk to NPC, tells you to go to next place, and it's not just linear, but it's like kind of railroady. I think a variety of settings to me is less important than the variety of options that players have. It would definitely be awesome to see this sandbox expanded in another setting. I'd love to see that, but I don't think I begrudge Rime of the Frostmaiden for being focused on Icewind Dale.
Yeah. The only thing I was thinking is a good parallel that I think maybe did it better in another IP was like Skyrim. Is also like a cold weather geography where, I don't know about you, but the first time I played Skyrim, it was interesting the fact that it was like, yeah, it's cold weather, but it's not just icy tundra everywhere, because they realized that there are alpine forests, but also like deciduous forests, and also there's kind of swampy areas, even in colder climates. Not that that's the most important thing of an adventure, but I almost feel like a good evolution of an Icewind Dale could be imagining that you don't get some of the sameness between the towns. I think you and the book did a good job of separating Bryn Shander is different from Lonely Wood, which is different from a Dugan's Hole, which is different from a Goodmead. But I feel like you could do that even more in a place like Icewind Dale.
Oh, I think so. It would be interesting to see, I mean, it's not going to happen anytime soon, but maybe like 15 or 20 years from now in D&D 7th edition or whatever they do, to see like, though they're going to come back to Icewind Dale and it's not Rime of the Frostmaiden anymore. So like it's not just that this was this was Magical Alaska. It's that this was Magical Alaska and the sun stopped rising for 2 years, so it was absolutely frozen over. It should have different environments and stuff, I think, normally. This particular adventure, like you said, Tanner, kind of restricted it as part of its, like, theme.
Right, it, like, homogenizes some of the geography out of its nature, which, again, I'm not saying is a necessarily a bad thing, but coming into it, if you're like one of those people that really wants variety and you want your character to like go to a desert and then go to a jungle and then like, nope, you're gonna be stuck in cold climates because that's kind of what you signed up for. That's kind of the story.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting to see out of the pre-made products from Wizards of the Coast, it does feel like they tend to focus strongly on theme. Like, the Waterdeep Adventures is like, okay, you're in this one city the whole time. Descent into Avernus is like, okay, after you leave Baldur's Gate, you're in Hell, and this first layer of Hell, like, the whole time. And they definitely homogenize things, I think, to a fault. Tome of Annihilation, you're in Chult, but Chult is supposed to be this big, lush southern continent that should have a lot of biomes and variety, and it's really just all jungles and dinosaurs. And I'm not complaining about jungles and dinosaurs, but for the geographic scale that that adventure takes in, like, I think Icewind Dale is smaller physically than we think it is. Chult is one where I would expect more biodiversity because of the scale of it.
Yeah, that's why I bring up a place like Skyrim, because I know, like, when I played the game again, it was an ability where someone had done the research to realize that Norway is different from Canada, which is different from the Alps, which is different from Siberia, and which is different from Iceland, and which is different from Greenland. Like, you can have cold weather climates that are actually very different in their feel.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something that maybe D&D does not do as well, where they, like you said, they kind of double down on, you're only here, and it's a jungle, and it's only jungle, and there's only such thing as one rainforest.
It's the Star Wars thing, right? Where it's like, jungle planet, Hoth, frozen planet,
One thing I want to add is one thing I wish D&D did more as a whole is something I got introduced to with Pathfinder. Before each kind of adventure, it tells you, hey, these are the things that are going to be thematically tied in. So, like, coming into Rime of the Frostmaiden, I didn't know what to expect whatsoever, so I didn't have anything to work with as far as what should I make my character to tie in to this setting and this adventure. All I had was it's called Rime of the Frostmaiden. So, like, I was like, okay, I'm just going to play a character that sounds interesting and hope there's good ways to tie him in. But it would have been really cool is if, like, hey, there had been a player handout made by the people writing the module. Like, I'm not going to ask DMs to do more work on this. Like,
although
that's not the DM.
To your point, I'm not saying DMs should have to do it, but for me personally, I've started doing that in the campaigns I started after Rime of the Frostmaiden.
Yeah. And, like, because one thing when I started reading, because Pathfinder puts out these player guides for various ones that introduces, like, unique mechanics for this one, some need to know about the premise and the context of the adventure, and hey, here's what's going to tie in the most, here's what will tie in the least, here's what's thematically gonna be the most engaging, and I loved it. Like, I wish D&D would have done that more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think right now, right, it's unfortunate. They're a company that is driven by finance people, not the creatives. So they see that most books get bought by players to read through, not for GMs to run them. So they've been slowly removing GM resources, like that sort of information at the beginning or things like that. Because it's like, well, why spend the money on those pages when people aren't going to get value out of them? The structure, and Tanner, because you've been running adventures recently, the structure between a Wizards of the Coast written module and written, I'm going to shout her out again because I can't help it, I'm in love with Kelsey Dion's brain. The Arcane Library does such good adventure templates like the structure of here's something that's written for someone to run easily, and here's something that's written for someone to read at bedtime is very different.
I feel like I don't know, as a person who has done a little bit of DMing now, that Wizards of the Coast and other authors don't realize is like, what we need help with is help us with the mechanics and help us with the skeleton of characters and motivation, but then we will flesh out the world after that. We will add all the meat, and in fact, the characters will help build the world with us.
Yeah.
But what I need the most help with is what's going to be a challenging battle? What's a good skill check for this thing? What does a good map look like? Those are the things that are like tougher that people need help like defining. But then give me like 3 bullet points for a character, and I and my players will like flesh out that person and give them a reason to exist in this world.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of times they focus so much on like their documents are just full of prose, and like I don't need all this description. I just need bullet points, and I'll take it from there.
Yeah, and again, to Rime of the Frostmaiden's credit, in terms of structure, this is as far as I've read, this is absolutely hands down the strongest 5th edition book. There's a couple that I haven't looked at too closely. The main one being Radiant Citadel, because I don't want to spoil it for myself. But I'm gonna go ahead and assume that
avoid it, man. Don't do it.
I'm gonna assume that that the structure in Rime is stronger than that in Radiant Citadel, based on what I've noticed, the things that you've had to like figure out and things like that. I think we got a little bit of time left. If you guys, I know we said 6:30. Are you cool? We started a little late. Are you cool going a couple more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I want to talk about the overall structure of the campaign, and then hit some like favorite moments and things like that. I think we already talked about some really cool character moments. I should shout out the party. This was supposed to be a screen that the audience can see of the party, and then I could switch to a slideshow. That was supposed to happen a really long time ago, but we've been having so much fun talking, I forgot to do that. So we've talked about Vyre, we've talked about Fabian. The other person that started the adventure with Vyre is Abrielle. She is a drow wizardess, a divination cleric? No, she's not divination. She's some sort of wizard, sword dancer. She's a sword dancer.
Blade singer.
Blade singer. That's it. Blade singer. She was played like as being very curious about ancient ruins and stuff. So she ended up having a really good tie-in for the adventure also, because it ended up being about these ancient civilizations. The other 2 characters joined pretty late. I think Calamar, the other drow, joined at chapter 5. He is essentially the player wanted to be from outside Icewind Dale, but have a mission going in. So we talked back and forth, and he is a devotee of Lolth, who is the other evil goddess and the goddess of darkness. And she's basically jealous that Arl is like stepping in on her shit. So Calamar is here to put a stop to that.
Some goddess politics.
Yeah.
Some mean girl shit.
And then the last one is... God, I'm going to feel terrible. I've got access to the name right here. I can find it. And this isn't my fault. The player purposefully makes super generic names, so I forget them. Friday, thank you. I couldn't remember because all his characters are named after different days of the week. Friday is a human fighter ranger. That player is not super focused on roleplay. It was very much just going on the adventure with everyone. I think he got into it a little bit at the very end, and I'm excited to hopefully growing that a little more. But I just know that player's style. He's here to beat up some monsters, and he had fun doing that. This was, again, not the starting party. So, starting out, like I said, I started the adventure out with, actually, before we started the book, we played some of the one-shots to kind of do the introduction stuff. The party comes in from the Spine of the World Mountains, and this was the first time I got to see some stuff where you meet those awakened animals, and that is teasing Feral Tongue, the Goliath evil druid who awakened Frostclaw. This was all stuff that I think Fabian was not there for. But you go around 10 towns, you start doing individual adventures, and adventure structure that I ran was a little modified because you traveled back and forth a good bit from 10 Towns to Wormdoom Crag as you were dealing with Frostclaw stuff. Frostclaw was essentially like Jaws, but as a bear on land, which I actually really liked. If I ran this adventure again, I would 100% add Frostclaw into... Frostclaw's not part of the main adventure, it's the side stuff from the season 10, but I'd 100% just add Frostclaw into the adventure.
Before we leave this, Cameron, I want to hear your top 3 things you would do differently.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, oh, and I've got that.
Okay.
Yeah, so chapters 1 and 2 happen while the party's dealing with the Goliath stuff. Vyre basically was there the entire time for all of it. Eventually, the Goliath stuff leads into Nyogi, these alien spiders, kidnap a bunch of them, and take them down into Zorventroth, the forgotten Dragonborn city. And that leads into this Far Realm horror stuff that was the end of the Plague of Ancients. It ended up with an invasion of Wormdoom Crag. It was a lot of fun. But that was all like the side stuff. While that was happening, you all were exploring Chapter 2. And the parts of Chapter 2 that I did run were the Lost Spire of Netheril, where you went to this... That's a weird structured adventure because you start out and you're hunting for a red yeti. I don't remember if any of you remember that. But the book's like, you're going to go into the wastes and you're going to hunt a red yeti. And then it's like, you found this spire. Okay, we care about this now.
Yeah, like, I remember the Red Yeti coming up. I don't remember there actually being a conclusion for the Red Yeti part.
I added a conclusion. I made someone else. I made like a rival adventurer kill it off screen because I was like, "You're gonna be I know your personalities. You're gonna be looking for this fucking thing."
Right, exactly.
And there's no actual Red Yeti.
My goal here is to end it, and you guys are gonna drag this out, hunting down this Yeti
that doesn't exist for real. Like it's not a stat block in the book.
You guys are gonna spend freaking 12 sessions hunting down a Yeti that I have to homebrew.
Yeah, that I can't homebrew. That was one thing you did in Chapter 2. The other thing you did in Chapter 2 was the Black Cabin, which is where you found the Summalar. That wizard from Bryn Shander was working on his own version of the Mythalar. I think, Fabian, you were there for that.
Yeah, which is weird because I didn't join in Chapter 2.
Well, so Chapter 2...
Did we go back to the Black Cabin and then I showed up, or...?
Yeah, so in terms of structure, Chapter 3 and Chapter 4 happen kind of inside of Chapter 2, not really after it. It's more like Chapter 2 is a series of individual adventures, and if you go into Chapter 3, you're doing a deep dive into one of those adventures. It's one of the Chapter 2 adventures that's way more fleshed out than the rest of it.
Sure, okay.
This is why I can't keep track of what was in what chapter, was because it's just all over the place. Like,
honestly, though, it probably speaks to a good structure because I feel like that gives you a lot of flexibility, right, and a lot of stuff to do, right, Cameron?
Yeah, and it allows the party, like, you all set the pace. Yep. It's like, when you are ready and you're curious about Chapter 3, you go there. And there's the chance that it happens really late or it doesn't happen at all. If you don't get clues about the Dwargar, like if you remember, there were in, where was it, Caer Konig, they were like invisible Dwargar stealing shit. And then in another area, you fought like two, or one of the princes. You could have met two of the Dwargar princes outside of Sunblight, and those are like hooks to bring you into Chapter 3. And I like that a lot, because it's like, it allows, it's not an NPC coming up and saying, hey, go deal with those Dwargar. It's like, oh, we ran into this thing, we got to deal with it, and now like let's go explore more. Go ahead.
It was still really funny that our paladin at the time, Korriman, they managed to pull off a hat trick.
Oh, the hat trick, yeah.
The hat trick of killing the princes and the king.
Yeah, all that royal family, the Sunblight family, Korriman fucking axed. The other stuff you did in Chapter 2 was the Dark Duchess, so that was where you met Arveatris. Angajuk's Bell was you really did it on the way to Chapter 5, but that's actually a Chapter 2 thing. The stuff you didn't do was you could have gone to, I mentioned it a couple times, and you could have, as you were investigating how to get into the into Ythryn, you could have gone to the Jarlmoot and met the ice giants, and I think you could have done that instead of the Dark Duchess. You could always do both things, but like those are both ways to figure out about the Codicil of White. There's a goblin tribe called Karkolak that Abrielle found an amulet that was like a shield guardian amulet that was tugging her in that direction. You all never really explored that one. The Id Ascendant was a gnome, what do you call the gnome? Ceramorphs? They're basically the gnomes that also eat brains. Players did some of the Id Ascendant stuff in the Season 10 side stuff, but you never did like the actual Id Ascendant adventure in the book. Cackling Chasm, Cave of the Berserkers, Revel's End, those were all things that like...
You never did anything with that talking moose? There was the talking moose of Lonelywood or whatever.
Oh, that was a chapter. That was a chapter 1 thing. That was like Lonely Wood's like chapter 1 quest. You didn't do Lonelywood, Tourmaline, Targos, or Caer Dineval. So like
I like to think in my own headcanon that Fabian was actually friends with the talking moose and knew the talking moose. And
it doesn't have to be headcanon. We can like again. You're gonna have 5 years of downtime. You can go meet like we can make that canon. You can go meet that moose.
Fabian is from Lonelywood, and given his love of the local creatures there, I feel like he would definitely know of a talking moose. That would seem a very strange thing for him to not be involved in some capacity.
It's kind of the same story as the Plesiosaur, where a druid awakened a moose. The moose is a lot more murdery than the Plesiosaur, but we can still try to make sense.
If it's killing humans, then like Fabian in his younger days probably would have just encouraged it.
Yeah. So that's the cool thing out of this book. Like the stuff that I just mentioned that you all didn't do is like a whole other campaign worth of material. The book it's not expecting you to knock every adventure off. It's like you're gonna do enough until you level up and the scope increases and you find out more stuff, and then eventually it puts you on the main thread. The way it puts you on the main thread is a little hackneyed. It's great up through chapter 4. You're exploring, you eventually find Sunblight, you eventually get the dragon attack. That's all very natural. The way it puts you on the main thread is the weakest part of the adventure, and that's when you meet Velin Harpel. The book gives you a necromantic witch with zombie dogs and zombie kobolds, and is like, no, she's cool.
So
unless you kill her.
Yeah, we had a complete misunderstanding about that because 2 of us had come from 3.5 where the necromancy is always evil. Like the raising undead necromancy, always evil. Like unless you're getting into the nitty gritty of the cleric stuff, that's necromancy, quote unquote.
Right.
So our paladin straight up kills this necromancer,
which I think is
NPC.
Perfectly like it was to me. It was like, yeah, that tracks. It was. We retconned it specifically because I was like, no, it was like a totally fair decision, but it fucks you for the rest of the campaign.
And technically in 5th ed, that's not the same. Like, it's not technically evil anymore. So, like, our characters just pretty much wouldn't have come to that same conclusion.
Yes.
So we retconned it that Fabian accidentally gave us a bunch of bad mushrooms.
Yes, it worked out. It worked out really nicely because it was even like before that happened, Fabian's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go collect some mushrooms." It was perfect. But yeah, so Velin Harpel, this is the part where the campaign gets a little railroady, where it's like, if you run it as written, Velin Harpel is like, okay. Go get the Codicil of White in Grimskull, and then we will go to the entrance of Ythryn. Again, as part of me trying to give player choice and agency, I purposefully didn't have, I made my version of Villain not have that information. That's why she was like, I've heard these rumors that you can learn about the Codicil in one of these 2 locations, and I've heard these rumors that we can find the entrance from information about one of these 3 locations. And it gave the party time to You went to the Dark Duchess to learn where the Isle of Solstice was, and then you went back to this Lost Spire of Netheril. You went there a second time to learn where the entrance to Ythryn was, because that spire is from Ythryn. So, like, you could have done other things to get that information, and it was important to me that you have those options. But Valinda I ended up, like, as much as her position in the adventure, I don't love that the type of NPC she is in terms of structure. I end up liking her as a character a lot. I don't know why I resonated with, like, just a sweet old grandma that is really curious about books and happens to raise the dead.
Yeah. I also don't know, like, if I were going to write an adventure like that and wanted to find the right balance between really big scope and sandbox, but also a story that you feel like you've got a main quest that has some kind of urgency to it and like high stakes. Because eventually players that are adventurers are going to want to go after the high stakes adventures, right? Like, and then how do you guide them without some kind of NPC that can kind of point them in some kind of direction? And
yeah, I think overall it did a pretty good job. The idea is a funnel, right? Like, you start out with a small sandbox. As you increase in levels, you open the scope up. And then in terms of structure, as you're opening the scope up, you're laying the seeds for a lot of signs to point in one direction. And that starts funneling them towards the end, kind of thing. Right. So that chapter 4 is the dragon attack. You meet Valin. She gives you ideas. Eventually, chapter 5 is you go and you see Arl. And I was worried that you all were going to... Everyone that I talked to online, other GMs, their parties kill Arl in chapter 5. Another one of my little tweaks, we're allowed in Adventures League to do tweaks. I added the Frost Giant Princess. She was my addition because I was afraid you were going to kick the shit out of a goddess the first time you meet her.
Yeah, quite the opposite occurred.
I think thematically it worked because Arl, like, right, her whole driving thing is like, oh, you should, like, she's coming at it from the wrong position. She's like, you should worship me, so I'm gonna spare you because you should worship me, kind of things. But yeah, that fight ended up. Maybe I overtuned a little bit.
Yeah, we almost died in that one.
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of changes, so I added that in chapter 5. Chapter 6, I basically ran as is. That had the Null Vampire that was, like, hit and running the party. And then chapter 7, the things I added, I expanded out the spires. Each of those towers are, in the book, they're a single paragraph. And I expanded those into more full-fleshed encounters. But yeah, overall, like, I think I'd highly recommend it. It was a lot of fun. Don't run it using Adventures League rules, so you have the flexibility to make the changes you want to make.
Maybe don't run any full campaign as Adventures League.
Yeah, I think in general, don't. If you're gonna do Adventures League, go for D&D night on, like, on a weeknight where you're doing one shots and doing an epic. Okay. I guess very last thing. Oh yeah.
I have one question.
Yes.
So, you know how there was the 3-part map with the final battle with the Thane in the Ice?
Yes.
Where did you get that map?
Yes, I should shout out.
Because that was epic. It showed the different stages of the fight in this map. That's part of why I thought it was part of the official material, was that fight had such a powerful map.
Yes, It was a lot of fun. I think it ended up being like, it was like a 6-stage, like you're watching the thing break out of the ice slowly and then march across the map. It was a lot of fun. I found it on Patreon as I was searching for Thing in the Ice. Someone, like, made that and it worked, like, pretty perfectly. So yeah, I'm going to make sure I shout out the artist for that because that was incredibly good. The other one I want to shout out real quick is Adventures, Rime of the Frostmaiden. Maybe I have it over here. Patreon. Oh, perfect. Fuck. That's all up in my webcam. The person who made the map is called Balatro. Balatro. They're on patreon.com/BalatroArt. they do a lot of multi-staged maps like that. I realized my camera was covered up the entire time because I'm the way I'm doing it, but that is okay. The other thing I want to shout out where I got a lot of my expanded information from was the Rime of the Frostmaiden Complete DM's Guide on DM's Guild. This was made by Eventyr, Eventyr Games. A lot of the, especially the expansion in Chapter 7 I did of the towers came from them. That was really good. I think the last thing I was just going to ask is like, okay, we talked about your characters and stuff. Was there a particular moment that was like your favorite moment in the campaign? And then Tanner, I'll answer your question about the things I'll change.
Oof, there were so many cool moments. Like, there were, like, Vire had so many moments where I was able to just kind of bring the character to the forefront. That I look forward to him getting to play in a campaign where there is the flexibility for that to get expanded on. Like, there were so many good moments. I'm not sure how to pick just one. I've mentioned a few of them already. There was a potent moment where there was a hag that had been eating people, and everybody's like, I mean, and she was begging for her life, and everybody's like, should we spare this hag? And Vire literally kind of consulted his guide and went, no, we need to eliminate this threat. And that was a very potent moment because I did not expect to be put in charge of that decision. So, like, there were so many little things just throughout the course of it that were just...
I'll shout out one of my favorite parts. It wasn't just Vire, but it was one moment where I thought we really got into the role play. So Vire, out of all the characters, had the biggest attachment to the Wormdoom Crag Goliaths because of how much time he spent with them on the adventure. So when Vire got to be part of the instrumental parts in negotiating the peace between the Wormdoom Crag Goliaths and the Sky Tower Goliaths, to me was like a very big, like, cathartic payoff moment for the time that he invested with these peoples to gain their trust and things like that. That was really, really neat. Fabian, what about you?
Yeah, I think for Fabian, his biggest turning point was when we already mentioned it, the encounter with Arl and her bodyguard giantess, right? Was that in Grimskull? That was. Because I think there was two parts to that. There was the fight where we almost died, and Fabian, because he was kind of a sharpshooter, right, from a distance, was left alive and had to, when everyone else was down, was kind of pulling bodies away to safety, which was not his comfort zone because he was not there for combat. And then when we finally went back and did the trials was the first time that he was confronted with this whole concept of embracing Arl as his goddess, right? So all of that happened kind of in quick succession, probably about a quarter of the way through his adventuring with the group. So yeah, that was fun. That was both fun from a tactics combat side and fun to kind of say, like, what would my boy Fabian do in this situation? Because he is completely out of his element, but in reality he's in his element and he just doesn't know it.
Another Fabian moment I really, really liked was actually in Ythrin. So you hate magic. You don't hate magic, but you're like not cool with magic. You're in this magical underground city the whole time. But when you made the decision to support the idea of using the obsidian thing, like it felt like a moment of like Fabian setting aside his personal fears for the security of Icewind Dale. Was like it was a really cool moment for me as a DM to watch. That one was a lot of fun. Side note, that is also a campaign ending moment if you run it as written. All it does is transport you 10,000 years in the past, and the book says, "Okay, now you can run a different adventure." Yeah, you should go read that chapter 7 at some point. Okay. 3 things I would change if I ran this again, and I plan on it. You can't see it, but I've like been accumulating the minis. I'd love to run this again as an in-person campaign at some point. 3 things. I think I'd keep the overall structure. I'd keep my already existing changes. I think I would give Arbitrary an actual layer on the, like, she's got little ones, but I'd put her main lair on the map somewhere that the party could go and entreat with her. I think she's a lot of fun to interact with if you don't try and go fight her. But having her at a place to be would be really cool. That'd be change number 1. Change number 2, I think I would require all my new characters to run this adventure in the future will all be from Icewind Dale. I think giving people those like pamphlets where it's like, okay, this is the town you're from and this is what you know and this is who you know, gives just like really tight hooks into the adventure. Even if like they can be loners and stuff, but like they will still have immediate incentive to save Icewind Dale. That would be my second change. And then my third change, I think, would be I would give additional reasons to go to Revel's End. It's a really, really fun little side adventure. It ties into the fucking D&D movie, which is really awesome. I didn't realize that it was created and added into this book because the book was supposed to come out when the D&D movie came out originally. And I've read that structure of that little adventure, and it's a lot of fun. I'd give a lot, like, I think I gave 2 different reasons to go to Revel's End. I just gave a couple additional hooks to try and get the party over there, I think. Those would be my big 3 changes. But again, overall, I'm very happy with the way things turned out, despite the limitations that we kind of had to work through. It was a lot of fun. And I'm super excited to take a 5-year break in game time, not in real life time. See where Vire, Fabian, and whoever else is 5 years from now that they've got the time to spend all their gold. They've got new time to like influence 10 towns and the politics. There's things like I'm curious about exploring. Like, or if you remember right, 3 of the towns in 10 towns were doing human sacrifices. Like, what's their relationship gonna be like with the rest of 10 towns now that it turns out, oh, they didn't need to do that shit? Like, things like that, I'm super curious to dig into. And yeah, maybe we'll do another one of these videos after that campaign is finished. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Yeah. Any parting words or anything, guys?
I had a lot of fun, and I look forward to seeing where things go.
Yeah.
Definitely. Recommend Rime of the Frostmaiden was a good time. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and again, don't run it in it using Adventures League rules, but the Season 10 adventures, like those side adventures, Frostclaw, Zorventroth, like add that stuff in. That was some fun stuff. Just come up with an idea for curing Shardolin corruption. All right, Bye everybody.
Bye.
Adios.